What was Pearl Harbor? Let's find out. Chapter 4, Trouble at Dawn. Here's water, the ocean. Here's a Japanese plane, and look, on the aircraft carrier, water is coming on to the top. While most people at Pearl Harbor were sleeping, Commander Mitsu Fuchida prepared for battle. Fuchida donned a red shirt. If bullets hit him, the shirt would hide signs of blood from his troops. The Japanese fleet had stopped 230 miles north of Hawaii. From this spot, attack planes would take off from the carriers in 2 waves, an hour apart. Fuchida saw with alarm that the seas were very rough and dangerous for takeoff. Water burst over the decks of the carriers, which rocked back and forth. Crews desperately hung onto the planes on the deck to stop from falling overboard. But the day of battle had come. There was no turning back. And we know this is a Japanese plane by the red dot, you see? Shortly after 6 a.m., Fuchida gave the order to take off. One by one, airplanes from all 6 carriers roared to the sky. The pilots circled until 183 planes were in the air. Fuchida was in the lead plane. The other pilots followed behind him. Pearl Harbor was 90 minutes away. We know they are Japanese fighter jets because of the red circle. The red circle. At Oahu, a small ship called the USS Ward was in early morning patrol near the entrance to Pearl Harbor. At 6:45, lookouts suddenly spotted something sticking out of the water. It looked like a buoy, but it wasn't. It was the conning tower of the enemy submarine. Look at this. Okay. Commence firing, the patrol boat commander ordered. His crew fired at the sub, first with guns and then with depth charges, underwater bombs. The submarine exploded in a gush of foam. Although they did not know it then, the sailors had just sunk a Japanese midget submarine. Without delay, the commander radioed in a report of the sinking. The message went slowly from one office to the next. Finally, it reached the top headquarters. The report caused quite a stir, said one witness. However, officers thought it was not important enough to put the whole fleet on alert. No action was taken. Do you remember what this is called? It's new technology for the war. What is that called? A radar. Another danger sign quickly followed at 7:02. 2 young privates were on duty at a lonely radar station on the northern tip of Oahu. Suddenly, a huge blip appeared on the screen. It looked like a group of 50 or more planes was just 140 miles away. One of the soldiers grabbed the phone and reported the sighting. An officer listened to the news, but he remembered several U.S. planes were due in that morning from California. He figured those planes accounted for the blip on the radar screen. Don't worry about it, he said. Twice. Danger signals were spotted. Twice. They were ignored. Later, the military would deeply regret those mistakes. Meanwhile, the first wave of Japanese fighter planes drew steadily over to Oahu. By 7:30, the second wave of planes was also in the air. Altogether, there were 353 enemy planes. Everything was going according to plan. Still, Commander Fuchida had reason to worry. A cloud cover lay over the island. Look at all those planes. And we know that they are Japanese fighter planes because of the red circle. That would make it hard for the pilots to find their targets. Then suddenly, the clouds broke. The coast appeared below. It would be a clear day after all, perfect for an air attack. Fuchida saw the U.S. battleships up ahead. A more favorable situation could not have been imagined, he later wrote. Fuchida radioed his pilots, "Choo, choo, choo! Attack, attack, attack!" It was 7:49 a.m. Japanese Navy Type 94 carrier attack plane. A Japanese bomber approaching Pearl Harbor. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Who is that? The President of the United States of America. Heikki Tojo. President Roosevelt requesting a declaration of war from Congress on December 8th, 1941. A Japanese commanding officer on one of the aircraft carriers. Aerial photographs of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. This is before the bombing. Hiroshito, the Emperor of Japan. He looks very young. Japanese planes take off from an air carrier at Pearl Harbor. And we know they're Japanese because they have the red circle. You can't see it real well. U.S. sailors dousing flames from the USS West Virginia. So this ship had gotten hit. So they're trying to put water on it so that they can put out the flames. Aerial view of Battleship Row at the beginning of the bombing. I wonder if this changed how we placed ships and where we put them. And if we put everything in one place. Be interesting to look up. Second Lieutenant Kenneth M. Taylor and Second Lieutenant George S. Welch. A slightly damaged USS Maryland and the capsized USS Oklahoma. Oh no, that's capsized. It means it is sinking. It did not survive the battle. Newspapers announce Japanese relocation to internment. Of the attack on Pearl Harbor. It says, we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. A World War II Japanese long lance torpedo outside the U.S. Navy headquarters. That is a Japanese torpedo. That is huge. Memorial plaque mounted on the wreck of the battleship USS Utah. Sailors honoring men killed in the attack at the Naval Air Station. USS Arizona sunk and burning as men aboard the USS Tennessee aim hoses at the water to deflect oil from their ship. See, all the water to push away the oil. Torpedo planes attacking Battleship Row. Where are the planes? The Unit 22 band of the USS Arizona on the night before the attack. Navy band. A New York crowd holding up newspapers announcing the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. USS Arizona Memorial. USS Indianapolis. Commanding Officer Captain E.W. Hansen. The Manzanar Relocation Center in California for the Japanese. We didn't know who was spies and who was not. This was not very nice of us. Doris Miller receiving the Navy Cross. Honolulu, Hawaii in the 1940s. A crashed Japanese Type 00 carrier fighter Zero. Oh, look at this. We'll have to ask if this is true. Typical sleeping quarters of the U.S. Navy men on a battleship. I wonder if this is better. Japanese naval officers giving troops instructions. At 40 torpedo bombers flew towards the U.S. battleships. Behind them were high-level bombers. Other groups of planes tore off the airfield. Lieutenant scanned the skies. All he saw were his own planes. No American aircraft were rushing to defend the Pacific Fleet. Tora, 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 Fujita radioed in the Japanese Navy. Tiger, tiger, tiger! The code word meant that they had made it into the harbor in secret. So far, so good. All right, so look at this guy. This is a Japanese warrior. Way of the Warrior. Before Japanese troops left for Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto reminded them to stay true to their Bushido code. This ancient code laid out strict rules of conduct for warriors. They had to be loyal, do their duty, show courage and self-control, and be ready to die for Japan. Bushido warriors valued honor over their own lives. Bushido warriors always wore certain items of clothing in battle. On the morning of December 7th, pilots tied scarves around their heads. On each scarf was a flaming red dot, the symbol of Japan. The Japanese word for certain victory was sewn into each scarf. Around their waists, some of the pilots tied a belt of 1,000 stitches for good luck. The belts were made by Japanese women, each sewing one stitch under there were 1,000, until there were 1,000. All right, guys, we'll see you again later.